Hello and welcome back. It's Lois here from Lois and Morgana Davidson Art, and today I'm going to be painting this beautiful Irish lake and mountain scene. I'm using hot press paper to show you that it can be used for landscape painting. It just needs to be treated a little bit differently. It has no texture to speak of, it's very smooth, and so dry brush is a little bit harder to achieve. So we're looking for nice clean brush strokes and clean washes, keeping it nice and simple in order to make the best out of this lovely smooth paper. But first, a quick peep at my new book, Landscapes in Watercolour, Tips and Techniques for the Complete Beginner, which is now available to order or pre-order, depending on where in the world you are and which shop you choose. So now back to the demo. As always, I'm sketching out the scene very lightly in pencil, just positioning the trees, the mountains and the lake. That's all I need, is this very simple outline. I'm going to wet the sky all over. I'm using a large wash brush for this, just allowing the water to soak in a little bit, but keeping a nice sheen on the surface of the paper, wetting with horizontal brush strokes across the lake because I want to reflect the sky colours in the lake. This is cobalt blue with a touch of cerulean blue, but lots of water, and you can see that I'm keeping the brush strokes, sweeping them across horizontally across the page to create this very slightly graduated wash. Slightly darker at the top and lighter across the bottom, then using the tips of the brush to just sweep through a few brush strokes to indicate the lake. Horizontal brush strokes, leaving some unpainted paper between them, and that should give me a little bit of sort of light reflection on the lake. With a wash like this, where I've used lots of water, it's really important to carefully clean around the tape on the edge. The tape has a sort of slightly shiny surface to it, and the water can pool up on there and then find its way back into your drying sky and give you some nasty marks. So I'm using a piece of paper towel just to wipe off the tape. So this is Saunders Waterford hot press watercolour paper. It's taped to my board with ordinary decorator's masking tape, and my board's at an angle of about 20 to 30 degrees. Using my Princeton Aqua Elite 1.5 inch Mottler and a mixture of Hooker's Green with a little burnt sienna and raw sienna added to it, I'm just quickly putting in the land. I want the grass to be reasonably green. I shall put a little bit of sort of raw umber tone into that colour as well to indicate where the grass meets the lake. So working between greens and sort of light browns, coming up to the lakeside, feathering out the brush strokes to almost nothing to indicate where the land sort of disappears into the lake. I've added some Payne's Grey to my mix, and you can see that I'm dropping in some darks, again using the tips of the brush, keeping the brush strokes horizontal so that my land stays flat. I've now switched to my Escoda Perla size 14 round brush, and with this lovely dark sort of greenish grey mixture I'm going to paint in the first layer of my two trees, leaving plenty of gaps for the sky to show through. Fairly rich paint, although my sky is more or less dry now. But be careful, wait until your sky is more or less dry before you put this richer paint on. Dab your brush out onto a paper towel to control the water in the brush if the paint's a bit wet. Leaving plenty of gaps, putting in the indication of a few trunks, and once I've got my trees positioned, I can then quickly pull a few paler highlights through the trees for little highlights on trunks and a few branches later on, dragging the tip of my palette knife carefully through the damp paint. You can see it pulls the paint up in places and gives me the indication of a few branches connecting some of the canopies. This will do me for my trees for now. I can come back and finish them off later. And then a few more dark shadows with this lovely dark colour to this little rocky outcrop here. And then once that's done, I shall leave this all to dry completely. Once it's completely dry, then I can paint on the mountains and finish the scene using the wet on dry method, which is where we use mixtures of wet paint, as the method says, onto the dry page. So when using the wet in wet method, we get softly diffused marks where the paint and water just blend. Here, the mark stays where we put it and we have to blend it ourselves. So using quite a watery version of this lovely grey made from cobalt blue, touch of burnt sienna and a touch of Payne's grey, and my size 14 round brush, I've placed the top of my mountain and I'm dragging and blending that paint down with the brush to form the shapes of my mountains, trying to get the contours of the mountains suggested, but still keeping them nice and clean, so I can keep this look of aerial perspective, so that I'm sort of creating some depth and distance, but with minimal amount of brush strokes. Just want everything to look a little bit misty. Slightly darker across the bottom just to suggest the further shore and the paler mountains behind. Trying to make sure I get a nice flat horizontal edge to the lake, making sure I go behind my trees as well. And then a quick glaze of this same green colour across the foreground, just to intensify the colour a little bit, and just a few adjustments here and there. Trying to keep the brushwork to a minimum. With hot press paper, the paint tends to sit on the surface a little bit more than it does with cold press, so you want to be careful not to lift up the paint when you're applying glazes. So now I'm going to begin to work into the trees and slowly build up some depth to the canopies with some nice dark shadow colours. Working around the paint that's already there, so some of that still shows, but adding some darker shadows and just a little bit more shape to the canopies here and there, slowly sort of building them up. Then once I'm happy with my trees, which I took my time over because they were my focal point, I'm adding a few darks here and there, again just below that little group of rocks there, and then a few darks here and there just on the lake side or the edge, to give me a bit of shadow but without too much. I'm trying to show you how simple a painting can be like this, painted on hot press paper, where we don't overwork it or get any sort of mud from overworking certain patches of the painting, just keeping it fairly fresh and very simple. And we've got this lovely tranquil scene that I think has been enhanced by using this lovely smooth surface paper. Hot press paper can be a bit tricky to start with, but it's worth persisting with and trying to sort of learn how to change your style to suit the paper, because I think it can be really beautiful. So I've removed the tape and now we can see it with fresh eyes, and I just think I need to soften a few marks here. So I'm using an eradicator brush from Rosemary & Co. It's got very soft but very short little hairs, and I can dip it into clean water and gently rub away to soften any marks that I think might be a little bit too harsh. So it's great for lifting out mistakes, moving paint around and softening things. It's a lovely little brush. So here's the finished painting, and I hope you found it helpful. Hot press paper isn't to everybody's taste, but I think it's worth trying it out and seeing what you think of it, because I really like it. And I think it makes a nice change from the more textured cold press or rough surface papers. If you enjoyed the video, please leave us a like and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. It's free to do and it really helps with our reach. And many thanks to everybody that supports our channel and us on Patreon. And if you'd like to support the channel, please follow the links below. I'll see you again soon. Take care and happy painting. Bye.